down, right? But what I'm going to try to do today is I am going to try to teach a lesson, but I'm going to try to summarize it beforehand because I know that as a teacher it can get long. And so here's what I'm going to try to do today. I gave our sermon this morning a title, and the title of today's sermon is, Are You Compelled or Commanded to Share Jesus? Right? That's the title. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to see if I can explain the whole thing first, right? So I'm going to get the whole point of what we're trying to do. I'm going to try to do it first, and then I'm going to dive in and explain to you all how I got there, right? So here's the message. Here's what I hope when we leave here today. Here's what I hope we get. I hope that when we leave here today, we feel compelled to share Jesus, not just commanded to. And for me, the difference there between feeling like you are compelled to share Jesus and commanded to is the recognition that either you think that Jesus is true or do you think Jesus is truth, right? For me, those who are commanded to share Jesus, they believe that Jesus is true. But those who are compelled to share Jesus believe that Jesus is truth. And see, for me, that's a distinct difference because I'm trying to summarize it, right? When you know something is true, what you mean is it can be tested. It can be verified. It is historically accurate, right? But when you know something is truth, everything changes in your life, right? You might have heard of gravity beforehand, but the first time you jumped off of your bunk bed because you thought you could fly, the truth hit you and everything changed. You never jumped off that bed again in that way. Because when something is truth for you, not just true, when something is truth for you, it changes how you live. It changes who you talk to. It changes who you fight with. It changes who you fight for. It changes how you think, what you say, what you listen to. And so the question that I am asking us, or the point that I want us to get to, is where we feel compelled to share Jesus because he is not just true, he is truth. Now, I want to show you how I got there, right? That's the lesson, right? So if you're like, I don't know where he goes from here, just go back to that part and we're good, all right? Okay, so here's how I got there. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I was looking at verse 16, and it said this. This was Paul. He was talking, and he said, Yet when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, for I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So I read this verse and I began to ask myself this question. I said, it's very interesting. He used the word compel here. Why didn't he use the word command? Why did he say, I'm compelled to preach? I'm not commanded to preach. I'm not commissioned to preach. He said, I am compelled to preach. And I began to ask myself, why did he use this word, and began to study and say, what is the difference between being compelled and being commanded? And when you begin to look this up, what you find immediately, if you begin to search, is you find that even though this seems like a small distinction, I actually think it has huge implications, because what changes is in the term of the motivation. The difference between compelled and commanded is motivation. You see, if you are commanded or compelled, both of us go and share Jesus. Let's be clear. Both of us go do it, right? However, when you begin to Google and search the words, you find that the word command has no internal motivation. You are acting because of an external force. Something on the outside has told you need to go do this thing, and so you do it. But because you don't have any internal motivation, you are not focused on the result, only on the action. You're only focused on the action. going to do it. But when you are compelled, the word compelled, when you Google it, says you are persuaded, you are convinced. In other words, internally, you want the thing too. You see, when you're commanded, it's a responsibility. But when you're compelled, it's a privilege. In fact, not only a privilege, it's fun as all get out. It's fun. Because you actually desire the same results. You share in the desire for the result. You're not focused on the action, you're focused on the result. And that to me is a distinct difference, because I believe that when your motivation changes, it changes your methodology. It changes your delivery. It changes what parts you think are important, right? And I've begun to ask myself and begun to wonder, are we, and I begin to actually ask people, and some of the people in the room will tell you I've asked them, have we got to the point where we feel more concerned with the act of sharing truth than the result of it? Are we more interested in people, in us giving the truth than people actually hearing the truth, right? I want to give you an example of why I think this works, or how I think this works. I was at a parade. My daughter is an amazing dancer, let's be clear. Like top of the line, come on, kill the game dancer, right? Okay, all right. You know what I'm saying? Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it for me. You might outdance me, but you ain't gonna get hurt. All right, you'll go through me first, though. We'll do that. All right. My daughter is an amazing dancer. She's captain of her dance team at 14, which is she's amazing. All those things, right? So she was in a parade, and at this parade, she was marching with her team, leading her team, doing all those things. And of course, I don't know if you've been to a parade lately. They long, so I whipped out my lawn chair. I'm sitting there, right? I'm sitting there at the parade, waiting for my daughter to come through, when all of a sudden, two guys begin to walk through the crowd, and they are carrying chick tracts. I don't know if any of y'all know what chick tracts are, but I used to love these things when I was a teenager. They're little books, about this big. And what they do is they usually tell a story, and at the end of the story, somebody goes to hell, and they be like, yo, you don't want that for you. You better get Jesus, right? That's usually what happens with the chick tracts, right? So they're walking through, handing all the chick tracts to people. I see them hand them to the people next to me, and then they walk up next to me, and they go, here, and I go, oh, no, I'm good. I already love Jesus, right? Now, you would think, as I thought, that was the end of the conversation, right? I thought that was the end. Yo, I already got him. What is the point of you handing out the chick tracts? So that people will know Jesus. So you go to hand me one, and I go, I'm good. I know Jesus. End of discussion in my mind, right? So imagine my surprise when they walk by everybody else handing out chick tracts. They don't stop. I say I love Jesus. All of a sudden the chick tracts stop. Everything, they settle in. And now they feel like they got to check my Jesus. Right? And we get into this conversation, right, about this thing, and it is crazy, right? I'm going to just tell you, I'll point out just two of the things that happened in this conversation, right? First, they got to check my Jesus. So at one point, they go, what version of the Bible you read? Now, I'm going to just tell you all right now, if you don't know this, if you're ever in a conversation with anybody about Jesus outside of these church walls, and you have to ask the question, what version of the Bible you reading? You're lost. You're lost. Whatever you was trying to do is over, right? But at one point, he was like, what version of the Bible you read? And I was like, all of them, man. Like, I like to go back to the Greek and Hebrew if I can, right? Like, all of them. And he's like, well, the King James. And I was like, oh, my gosh. King James only. He hit me with. That's the one, right? The conversation, it got worse. At one point, in the midst of this conversation, and this is when I finally recognized something, I couldn't keep going. In the midst of this conversation, he goes to me. I say, man, yo, I love Jesus. I told you that. He says, you love Jesus, but I love Jesus Christ. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with that. So I said to him, all right, oh, bro, wait, we got to stop. I said, hey, man, what was the point of this conversation? What was the point of it? At the end of it, what do you want to happen? Because I'm going to tell you, nothing you're saying or doing right now makes me want to look into the Jesus you're sharing. Nothing you're saying or doing right now. He goes, well, you've got Jesus, I've got Jesus Christ. And I said, you're right, bro. I read the wrong version of the Bible. I read the wrong version. I follow a Jesus that's not right. Whatever it is, you're right. But at the end of this conversation, I don't want your Jesus. And as I'm saying this, one of the women he had handed a tract to walks up in the midst of our conversation, right in between us, shakes my hand and says, thank you very much for what you're doing right here. She walks away. Another dude comes over and he says, hey, man, I'm 65 years old. I've never asked to shake another man's hand, but I'd like to know if I can shake your hand. And he shakes my hand and he goes away, and I say, hey, guys, listen, I really do. I mean, we can ask questions, all of that. Here's what I want you to know. Here's what I hope you see right here, man. I'm really hoping you see this. The people you were trying to reach, you just handed them chick tracts. The people you were trying to reach chose my side. The Jesus that I am sharing right now, they found more compelling than the Jesus you're sharing. Now, what are you going to do? And you know what they did? They said, don't waste your time with here. He's lost. And they walked away. That's what they did. But here's the thing. If you think about it, it is very clear. They were not interested in the result. They were interested in the action. They got to walk away feeling really good that they shared the gospel. In fact, the truth of the matter is they walked away telling themselves they got persecuted by me. That's what happens. Because they're not concerned with me actually wanting to see Jesus, just with them getting to share it. They're not compelled to share Jesus, they're commanded to. And the problem is, it's very hard to give a compelling argument when you're not compelled. And so I had to ask myself, why is it that they are not compelled? Why is it that they didn't feel like the result mattered more than the action? And the reason is because for them, Jesus is true. I can prove him. Let's bring out the history book. The Bible is accurate. I can show you how it tells you to boil water to protect them when they're in the desert. It's true, but it's not truth. Because if something is truth, what happens is you are compelled to tell it. Because why? You want the other person to experience it. You see, Paul says he is compelled to share the gospel. Compelled. And we know he's compelled, right? Let's look at Acts chapter, I gotta look it up myself. Acts chapter 21, verse 8 through 14, right? Acts 21, 8 through 14. We see what it means to be compelled, right? Look at this. Look at this. I don't know if any of us, I just listen to the story. It's a crazy story, right? Here we go. Verse 8. Leaving the next day, we reached Caesarea. This is Luke, he's telling the story. And we stayed at the house of Philip the evangelist. He had 4 married daughters who all prophesied. Verse 10, and after he had been there a number of days, a prophet named Agabus came down from Judea, right? So he comes to the house, and he says, yo, he took Paul's belt. He tied his hands and his feet with it. It said, the Holy Spirit said, in this way, the Jews of Jerusalem will bind the owner of this belt and will hand him over to the Gentiles. All right, so just so we can see what's happening. Paul about to go to Jerusalem and try to preach Jesus, right? Before he gets ready to go, somebody walks in this mug. From here, we know it's a prophet. Walks in there and like, yo, listen, if you go in there, they gonna tie you up, right? The implications of being tied in this time was you about to get beat down, bro. They gonna physically whoop your tail. That's what's about to happen. If you go in there, they gonna give you a two-piece. They gonna tie you up and give you a two-piece. That's worse. Now you can't even show Jesus because you might take a two-piece and be like, I want to show you guys love if your hands is free. But if your hands is tied up, they just think you taking two pieces, right? So they say, you about to go in here and get this two-piece handed to you, Paul. And Paul says, listen to this. This is crazy. When he heard this, we and the people there pleaded with Paul. Paul, please, don't go over there. They about to give you the business. Don't go over there. Then Paul answered, why are you weeping and breaking my heart? You are breaking my heart by telling me not to go to this group of people. You're breaking my heart. Why? Because I am prepared not just to be tied up, I'm prepared to die so that I can what? Share the gospel with this group of people. And then it says this. It says, when they recognized he could not be dissuaded. Dissuaded is the opposite of persuaded. Paul was persuaded to go, not commanded. There's nothing in the text that says God told him to go. Nothing in the text that says he was commanded to go. He was persuaded to go. He was compelled to go. And they said, if you go, they're going to beat you down. And he said, I don't care, because guess what? I'll get to share with people about Jesus. So we have to ask ourselves, what was he persuaded of? What kind of craziness makes you go, I'm about to get beat down, but it'll be worth it if I can tell somebody about this thing? What kind of craziness does that? Y'all want to know? He tells us. He tells us, Romans chapter 8. Flip to it. Paul's still talking. Romans chapter 8, verse 38 and 39. He says it right here. He says, I am persuaded. Wait, I am convinced, I am persuaded, I am compelled that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, neither the present, neither the future, nor any powers, no height, no depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of Christ, the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Now we've heard this verse a lot of times, but I think we rushed through it a little bit. Let's take a second and listen to what this dude said, right? He said, listen, I am convinced that I will feel loved. I personally will feel loved if I die, if I live. If a demon comes right now and attacks me, I'm going to go, man, I'm still loved. He says, in the height, I'm loved. In the depth, I'm loved. He said, in this present moment, I'm loved. In the future, guess what? I'm loved. Now, here's the that's nothing in creation. Now, here's the thing. The worst thing that I have experienced in my life, I'm going to just share with you all, is grief. I don't know if you've ever had it in its rawest, unadulterated form. It sounds like some of you all have experienced it recently, and I'm praying for you, because Wednesday, when that happens, grief is the craziest thing I have ever experienced. Some of you all may have experienced more, but it is a crazy thing because it will do things to you that you have no control over, no ownership over, none of that. And Paul looks at that and says, yo, bro, I'm convinced that even in the midst of that, I'm going to sit back and feel loved. And he says, yo, that to me is what Jesus is. He's not true. He's truth. Do you know how crazy it would be to feel loved no matter what? Have you ever felt loved? Right? If somebody came to you right now and said, yo, bro, I know how you will feel loved no matter what happens in your life, what would you do? And if you began to feel that, you began to feel like no matter what happens, you feel loved? Would anybody have to tell you to tell people? No. You would be compelled to tell people. You'd want to tell them. It's not work for you. This ain't responsibility. This is joy. I can tell y'all for me right now, it's John 13 through 15, right? Here's the truth. At this point, it's just, I am compelled right now, right? I can tell you the people in my life who know me right now will tell you at times, they be like, dude, Wes will not stop talking about Jesus. He just won't, right? My poor mama gets it like 3-4 times a week. Pastor T will tell you, I'll call him at 10 o'clock, text him at 10 o'clock. Hey, bro, you up? He'd be like, yeah. I'm like, can I call you? Ask him. It has happened. It's true. Ask him. My mama, my people at work, I'll be at work, I'll be like, all right, I'm about to stop. I've been talking a lot. I say it all the time. Do you understand? I say it all the time. I say it to myself. I'll be like, bro, you got to stop talking about Jesus. People going to think you the scary Christian. I don't want to be the scary Christian. Y'all know the scary Christian? You trying to watch football, they be like, can we do a Bible study? You scary. I don't want to be the scary Christian. But the truth of the matter is, every time I find myself talking for any amount of time, I keep coming back to these things. In John chapter 13, you know what it says? In John chapter 13, it says this. It says, listen, this is how they will know that you are my disciples, because of the way you love one another. In other words, the promise there is you will have some of the deepest relationships that people see on earth. And I look around and I read the General Social Survey and I read the data and I read the studies, and I say, right now the average person in our country says they have 0.7 people they can talk to about important things. And I got like 17 I can call at midnight and be like, can I talk to you about Jesus? You out there lonely, bro? You out there lonely? You ain't got nobody? Yo, John 13 says, if you bring Jesus into the midst of that, you're going to have some of the best relationships ever. I just want to tell people that. I don't got to be commanded to tell you that. That's just truth. You look at John chapter 14, and in this he says, yo, listen to me. My joy I give to you. And when my joy hits your joy, guess what happens? Your joy is full. I said, hold on, wait a minute. Did you just say that if I have some joy, anytime I have some joy, if I add Jesus to that joy, all of a sudden, I'm going to feel full of joy? Is that what you just said? That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And here's the thing, I tried it, and it worked. If I sit to play a video game, and in the midst of playing that video game, I turn my mind to Jesus, do y'all understand how exciting things get? I'm just telling you, real talk. If I sit down to eat a meal, and I add Jesus into that meal, yo, it gets crazy, bro. I don't have to preach it. I just need to tell, yo, and here's what's crazy, right? He goes on, he's like, yo, here, John 15, he says, listen, my peace I give to you. But check out this peace. The peace I give to you, your heart will have no fear. Did you just promise me I could live with no fear? See, the Bible may be true, but if you get that truth right there, a few weeks ago, I was so sick. I was at home, and my heart was beating, I was coughing, I was sweating, thought I was gonna die. And I was scared I'm gonna die, and I said to the Lord, I think I'm gonna die. And I felt him say, didn't I give you peace? And I said, hold up, wait a minute. Even if I'm gonna die, God would want me to die in peace. Do y'all know I folded my legs up crisscross applesauce, sat at the end of my bed and just waited for whatever happened? I did. I sat at the end of my bed and just waited for whatever happened. Whatever it is, I got peace, bro. Ain't no need for me to fear. I might die in this place. I started thinking about my kids. I was like, yeah, they're going to be fine, man. Everybody's going to be good. And so what happened in my personal life is I began to move Jesus from being true to being truth. And what happened is now I wanted to go hang out with my friends because I know that when I bring Jesus into it, yo, bro, I'm about to kick it. It's about to be amazing. We about to have all kinds of joy, laughter, peace. We about to have an amazing time. And then what would happen is I'd go hang out with my friends because I knew that would happen. And then when I'm with them, I'd say, hey, guys, did y'all know that if you bring Jesus into this moment, it kicks it up a notch? And now I'm talking about Jesus, even though I didn't mean to. It's not evangelism for me. I didn't set out to do it. I didn't have my Romans road, my chick tracks. I'm compelled to do it because I believe it is truth. The question we have to ask ourselves is, do we believe it is truth? Because I see us doing a lot of weird stuff. Every chance I look at, and this is where I know I've been up a long time already, right? Let's go back to remember the beginning part. Go back to the beginning part, right? I want us to be compelled to share Jesus, and I believe that compulsion comes when we see him not as true, but as truth. And I would tell you all, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and this will have to be the part 2, those who are compelled to see Jesus as truth do two things that I see us not doing. Number one, the whole chapter, Paul is like, don't I got a right to do this? Don't I got a right to do that? But he begins by saying, but I refuse those rights because I don't want anybody to be able to say I mixed in anything that made it hard for people to see Jesus. So Paul quite literally says, those who are compelled to share Jesus don't insist on their rightness. Don't insist on their rights. But every chance I look up, we need our rightness. When I met these brothers at the park, they needed to show me it was King James only. They needed to show me it was Jesus Christ, not Jesus. And I didn't need that. I didn't need that. You can have it. You're right. King James only. You're right. It does not matter. Jesus Christ, you're right. What I want you to do is see the Jesus I'm trying to present right now. They like him. They like him. They chose him over yours. I don't need rightness. Every chance I look up, we trying to be right. This is how you better dress. This is what you better say. I read a post the other day that broke my heart. A pastor maybe was responding to a video, whatever it was, but a pastor I knew wrote a post. And in the post, he basically was just saying, hey, listen, if in the midst of your, if you're going to come to my church and act a fool for a funeral, then at a funeral, right? Grief. The craziest all of them, where you should be expecting. Here's the craziest thing. The church knows, everybody knows the church is open to you in your time of grief, if no other time. You don't even got to go to our church. We might host your funeral. But he said to them, you better take your tail to the park because I'm at you crazy. Now, does he have a right to do that? Yeah. Is he right to do that? Maybe. But why is he insisting on it? Why is he insisting on it? Does he want the people in the midst of grief to actually experience Jesus or not? Or would he rather be right? It's part one. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of that. I'm just telling y'all, we do a lot of that. The other question that we find from Paul, in the beginning of the chapter, he says, yo, I don't insist on my rights. And then after it, he says, yo, listen, I become all things to all people, right? And like I said, this after part two, we can't break this all the way down. But he ends by saying, I do this for one reason, right? Here's the one reason I do it. I do it so that I can share in the blessings that come from the good news. I know that if I can bring the truth of Jesus, not Jesus being true, the truth of Jesus to people, then guess what? When they get joy, I get to go, ain't this good? And he goes, it is good. We share in the blessing. That's why I'm calling people at 10 o'clock at night. It's not because I'm like, ooh, I just want to talk to them. I'm like, yo, bro, do you recognize if we do this, we can have this kind of joy? And they go, I think you're right. I'm like, I know. And they be like, yo, bro, that's dope. I'm like, I know. This is what's happening in my 10 o'clock at night conversations. I'm sharing in the blessing. But what Paul said is if you're really compelled, you are not only not thinking about your rightness, you're thinking about whoever it is you're trying to share the gospel with. If they go, what version of the Bible you read? And I go, all of them. And you go, and your next response isn't, okay, tell me about your favorite. You didn't care about me. You cared about you. You cared about the action, not the result. But those who are compelled, not commanded, those who are compelled, those who have the truth of Jesus inside of us, those of us who know, yeah, he can be true. I don't care if he's true. He's truth to me because I am experiencing joy, peace, love, relationships, happiness in ways that I could not fathom before. I want you to have that. That is the gospel I think they want to hear. That is a gospel I want us to share. And so we'll have to, like I said, we'll have to dive in. I'm a teacher. I let it walk through part one and part two. We got to do part two. But for us today, I go back to my initial statement. My hope today is that when we leave here, we would not leave here believing that we are commanded to share Jesus. We are. We are. And for a lot of us, that feels like a burden, a responsibility. But for those of us who are not commanded to share, we're compelled to. I'm about to have a whole lot of fun sharing Jesus with some people. I'm about to have a whole lot of fun sharing Jesus with some people. And I sure hope that for us, we can move past seeing Jesus as simply true and recognize he's truth. Jesus stood before Pilate and he said, Father, let us be compelled. Let us know that you are not just true. You are not just true. The words you gave to us are not simply to be repeated. The things you revealed to us are not simply to be taught as in some academic thing. You made us some amazing promises. Let us believe that you're the truth of those. Because your burden is easy. Your yoke is light. When we share in the desired outcome, God, which is that other people might experience Jesus in the truest sense, in the depths of their souls, they would see truth, and it would change them. And all we want to do is share in that change. Let us not be commanded. Let us be compelled.